Let's take a minute and go over the kit contents and how our anchors are designed. The entire kit is autoclavable. However, our anchors are shipped non-sterile. To sell these sterile would add about $25 to the cost of each anchor. Would you want to pay someone $25 to sterilize this for you? I know I wouldn't. We are already sterilizing things in our office each day. It's a better service to you to market them non-sterile. At this time, we have 4 TAD designs. Each are designed for a specific indication, for specific areas of placement in the oral cavity. There are several different types of bone in the mouth, and I didn't think it made sense to have one anchor design that is to be used across these varying bone densities and tissue thicknesses. This is not a one-size-fits-all system. It is custom-made with purpose. In this DVD, we will be covering the blue TAD and the yellow TAD. The purple and green TADs are specifically designed to be placed in the infrazygomatic process and the palatal approach areas. These are more advanced placement types, and they will not be covered in this introductory DVD. The yellow TAD is designed to be placed between the roots of teeth in the anterior region. It has a narrow shaft and a single thread type, which allows for it to be easily fit between the roots. You can use this TAD to shift or hold the midline and intrude or extrude the incisor. The blue TAD is designed for placement mesial to the first molars or between the roots of posterior teeth. You can use this TAD for molar uprighting, secondary anchors for space closures. It is by far the most versatile TAD and happens to be our #1 seller. All of our anchors have a base or platform. I published an article a few years ago about this topic, and research done at a leading university supports this theory. I call it the wall hanging theory. The name comes from an actual wall hanger. As of recent, much has been written and published about the stability of orthodontic implants. Much has been written about the lengths, the diameters. Even an article recently has been published about how much torque value when placing it and what significance that has on stability. The type of bone they're placed in, the angle of placement. There's one factor that has been overlooked as far as an anchor stability goes: the wall hanger effect. Let me explain. I like to use metaphors and word pictures when I teach. I have often used hanging a picture on sheetrock as a metaphor relating the physics of skeletal anchors to that of the picture hanging on a wall. Hence the name wall hanger effect. If we take a small nail, drive it into the wall, and then hang a picture on the nail, if the picture has substantial weight, the picture will start to sag or the nail will come out completely. It is important to note that the sheetrock failed, not the nail. The nail doesn't bend, the sheetrock internally crumbles or becomes unstable under the lateral or vertical force. However, if we were to purchase a wall hanger, the same nail would hold much more force because the presence of a platform transfers the force from inside the sheetrock to the surface of the sheetrock, which is much more stable. Another example would be a bottle of water. And if we place the bottle of water upside down on the table, when a lateral force is applied, the bottle is not stable. If we turn it right side up and apply force, it's much more stable. Let me give you another example. Are you more stable standing on 1 foot or 2 feet? Athletes get down in an athletic stance with feet spread wide, ready for force. The same can be said of skeletal anchorage. We designed this anchor with common sense and physics in mind. Our anchor has a platform. Consequently, when it is inserted, the force is transferred from inside the surface of the cortical bone. The surface is hard while the inside can be spongy. When our orthodontic force is transferred to the surface of the bone, it will hold a ton of force. If you were to stand on a sponge, the sponge would give under weight and you would shift positions. If you stand on a piece of granite, you can remain in place because the granite is strong enough to hold your weight. The inside of the bone is like the sponge and the surface of the bone is like the slab of granite. Where do you want to build your house? On sinking sand or solid rock? So, I am more concerned with what we place on the bone as opposed to what we place in the bone. So what we did is put the base on the TAD, and then upon insertion we torque the TAD until the base is seated on the bone, and we get the wall hanger effect. Consequently, the TAD can hold more force. Research done at a major university confirms this theory in vitro. So we just discussed the common sense physics behind having a base on the TAD to give us more stability. Now let's discuss the science and bone physiology behind the wall hanger effect. We know that bone forms under pressure. The converse is true of an astronaut in space. Over time, their bones begin to resorb and degenerate. And we know that when you put pressure on a bone, bone is formed under the pressure. We think we have a good idea why this happens, and it has been documented in vivo. And I'll do my best to give a simple explanation of this. It should be left to those who have done research in this area, but I will attempt to explain as best as I understand what is happening. If we take an osteocyte and look at it under a microscope somehow in a three-dimensional cube, there are typically 50 to 80 tentacles going out in all three planes of space from this osteocyte cell. And if we apply pressure to the side of this living bone, what happens is fluid is pumped from the tentacles to the nucleus and produces nitric oxide. And we know that nitric oxide is an inhibitor of osteoclasts. So look at the osteocyte as like a regulator to bone formation, to bone resorption. It keeps everything in a static state and maintains bone. It's simply a mature cell that regulates what happens with the bone. So under pressure, the nitric oxide is produced, which then causes an inhibition of osteoclasts, which would then allow for osteoblasts to be formed, which in turn forms more bone and osteocytes. On the contrary, if apoptotic activity is initiated through no pressure on the bone, such as our subject in space, then apoptosis occurs and tumor necrosis factor alpha is produced, which in turn stimulated osteoclastic activity, which causes bone resorption. So if we were to place an orthodontic implant in bone and upon insertion, because of poor placement protocol, we fracture the bone with little micro fractures, it would cause osteoclastic activity because of the absence of pressure on the bone in the extra space that was created through fracturing upon insertion. However, if upon insertion we drill a pilot hole and then insert the TAD in the pre-drilled hole, we create lateral pressure and the orthodontic implant should remain stable. If an implant is placed in adequate bone under proper placement protocol with proper forces placed without damaging the bone, the TAD will produce pressure, which in turn produces nitric oxide, which inhibits osteoclastic activity. So if we add a base to the anchor that places pressure on the surface of the cortical bone without damaging the bone whatsoever, and then we cause more bone to be laid down. All this is based on in vitro studies on how implants work. That brings up the subject which I'll just briefly touch on, which is how teeth move under pressure. And that is simply because of the periodontal ligament. When pressure is present, cytokines are produced, and this stimulates apoptotic activity, which we know causes osteoclast and bone resorption. Hence, teeth move through bone. So I said all this to say this. An orthodontic mini implant with a platform fully seated on the bone is more stable and allows you to load the anchor with greater force to achieve optimal orthodontic tooth movement. Now that we've plowed that ground and planted the seeds, let's move to TAD placement.